So, Brogan, I think I kind of landed us in some hot water here.
How so?
So, you know how, when Big John Studd, our former
God rest his soul.
producer, yeah, God rest his soul, died earlier. And you know how subsequently afterwards, a big rock in the shape of his face showed up in the sky and said, we're doing a new election, and whoever is the most popular podcaster becomes the king of podcasts. Basically gets to own Spotify, right?
Yeah, Big John Studd did say that we were doing basically a Big John Studd, God rest his soul. So sorry.
Yeah.
He did say that it was like a single elimination bracket, and literally by popular vote, whoever was the most popular podcast would be the king of the podcasts by the end of the next year. So
Yeah.
that happened about a couple months ago when Big John Studd, God rest his soul, passed away.
Yeah. Shortly after he threatened the life of David Zaslav.
Very, very briefly after he threatened the life of David Zaslav. Coincidence? Some may argue against that, but
Yeah.
it is yet to be proven. So I will hold my
Yeah.
tongue.
Yeah. But of course we've been kind of trying to like play the system here, get our names out there, see what we can do. And so I went on to the podcast of Will, right?
Yeah,
Will
yeah, yeah.
protagonist. Yeah.
Yeah, Will
The
from the
twink guy who
Gauntlet
does
Runner
a lot of
podcast. Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
political
With
podcast. Yeah.
heterochromia and
Yeah. Well, I kind of just decided on a whim to kind of like, do a guest interview with him. I probably should
he
have asked
invited
him
you on?
for.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy, but I think he kind of stomped me, dude.
Yeah, did he do the thing that he always does where he says, "What do you think the problem is?
Yeah,
What do you think the solution is?
yeah, and
That
then he
wouldn't
was
work
like,
at all."
yeah, yeah, that's kind of what he did, and I was trying to be nice and like, just kind of like propose some, some fun, bubbly solutions that I don't think anybody would be really all that upset about, and he was not having it. So, yeah, I think we might be out.
I mean, I don't call it out yet because this is the last episode of the year. And Josh, I have a plan. I know how we're gonna bring our ratings up.
Oh,
Jeff Keighley, the Oscars. This is the
that's
How-to
right.
Otaku Awards. Okay, so stay tuned
Oh
to the
yeah,
end for the awards segment of the show.
that's right.
Um,
We're gonna have our own special awards here on How to Otaku, the name of our podcast. I'm Josh.
I'm Brogan.
And if you haven't been here before, welcome. This is a beginner-friendly anime show where we just kind of like break down, some new topic every week, and we just try to like get people interested in the medium, through one show at a time, and
Very
this
book club format. But Josh, there's
yeah,
something weird going on here. I
this
looked
book
up
isn't a
metaphor
normal book.
ReFantazio, and instead of an anime, I didn't get like an episode guide. It took me to Steam and it asked me for $70.
Yeah,
And then I started playing a 200-hour JRPG. So what is going on?
yeah, this is a very strange book. It's not actually like a traditional book. It's a book within a video game that is about another book. You know, if that makes sense. It's a visual novel experience, but there is a book within it that then contains yet another book that is about our world in
So
a
it's
way.
like a metaphor.
Yeah, it's like a metaphor.
Okay.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Anyways, so just
Yeah.
for some context for the delusional schizophrenic posting going on right now, we recorded this episode already and we did 2 hours and 40 minutes and we got basically nowhere. And then the edit failed and then the upload failed. So, we switched the order of the Lord of the Rings episode in this one, and welcome to it. We have collected our
Yeah.
thoughts. We are prepared to present them much more coherently this time, and we hope you guys are ready to listen to us talk about a video game instead of anime. I know we're breaking the mold.
Yeah, well, it's an anime video game, right? Like, I think we've kind of had this discussion previously, where it's like what video games count as anime, right?
Mhm.
there's definitely some like anime influences in other games, especially Japanese games like DMC and Resident Evil and stuff like that have some influences, especially the later Resident Evil games that are kind of, more like silly action focused, but like
Resident Evil 6.
this
Sorry,
is like it's the Congress
I
of
know it
Sanity
when I
thing.
see it.
Yeah. But
You see it.
yeah, exactly. You know it when you see it, and this is definitely anime. And
This
we're
is
not gonna
more
do
of an
this.
anime game than Jump Force, I would
Yeah,
argue.
probably. And we also just kind of wanted to talk about it because, like, when's the next time Atlas is going to drop another, like, 100-hour RPG that is a brand new intellectual property
Right.
and, is meant to be the third pillar of their business next to Persona and Shin Megami
Get out of my
Tensei?
head! Get out of my head! Fucking pop up a picture of the DS right there, please.
But yeah, and honestly, this game makes a pretty good case. We do want to say that neither of us have finished it yet. You
Nope.
know,
In
we
fact, great opportunity to mention the cutoff point. We are 7 minutes in. So right now, here's your opportunity. The cutoff point for where we have finished playing the game is Brawlhaven. We got to Brawlhaven. We went to the pub where you meet Louis's guys and they tell you about a thing that you're gonna go meet Louis for. And
yeah
it's very vague, but there is a very distinct point where you get to Brawlhaven, big port city with boats. You get on a boat
Yep.
and you go to a bar and you talk to two guys and they tell you to do a thing with Louis.
yeah
That's the cutoff. If you've gotten there, we're going full spoilers from the beginning of the game till that point, but that's all we've played. So
yeah.
that's what we're covering.
And I think that at some point we're considering doing another episode on the rest of the game. Just like whenever we finish it, maybe that'll be a Patreon bonus or something like that. But like, yeah, we're considering bringing this back because I do think there will be stuff to discuss later on, especially because the way I've heard other people describe the late game content is like it takes some very interesting turns that you wouldn't expect towards the end, is what I've heard. But
I have not heard anything. I've been very intentionally horse blinders. If I see a Metaphor ReFantazio video, I click 14 other videos that are disrelated so I don't get another one. No spoilers for me.
yeah, but this game is so. Let's start with SMT and Persona first, just like kind of
Sure,
get
yeah.
that groundwork out of the way. What is your relationship to the franchise? Because for me, it's basically just 5 Royal. I've played a smidgen of 4, and I own 3 as well on the Switch, but I've only played through 5 Royal to the finish.
I have a very romantic relationship with Shin Megami Tensei in particular. I have a more tangible relationship with Persona, and I guess what I mean by that is the only SMT pure games that I've played are 3 Nocturne on the PS2, 4 on the DS, and 5. So I kind of got into the SMT game relatively late. I started playing SMT games after I played Persona 3. So I played Persona 3 on the PSP back in the day, the good old days of the PlayStation Portable back when that existed. T beyond that has always been kind of historic for me in a sense that I have come across them when I've been messing around with emulators and whatnot, and I've watched videos on people talking about them, but the older ones I haven't ever gotten very far into. I played some iteration of one of the first 2 games for maybe an hour and a half, and I didn't get very far. And then I played 3 and 4 and Persona 3, Persona 4, Persona 5. And even though I had a PSP, I never played Persona 1 and 2. And oh God, what is it? To Forgive, whatever the second one is, Innocent Sin, I think.
Innocent Sin, that sounds right.
But there are of spin-offs, there are Devil Summoner, there are Catherine is really tangentially related, but I consider it a spin-off of the SMT and Persona series.
Oh,
it's
you mean
very
Persona 2?
vast.
Sorry. sorry, Persona 2 Eternal Punishment is the name of the
Eternal
third one.
Punishment. Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were 3 Persona games before Persona 3. And if you ask anybody in the past 20 years, they'll be like, damn, Persona 3, 4, and 5, best trilogy ever. What happened to the first 2? That's my nitpick against Atlas in all this, is that we have yet to see those games even re-released for a more modern audience. I understand some issues with those games and why re-releases may be more difficult, especially with some localization challenges. However, you can do it. So please and
You
thank
got the
you.
money.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's very, very impenetrable from an outsider standpoint, I would say. There are some great videos if you're interested in SMT. There's a guy that does a bunch of challenge runs called Nyarly, Nyarly, or something like that. You can find him. He does SMT challenge runs. From there, I'm sure you can find the corner of YouTube that will teach you more about SMT than I will be able to. But they've always been like, Dragon Quest has always been like the RPG where you grind and you grind and you fight all these monsters that Akira Toriyama drew, and you just level up and level up. That has always been that bubble. Then you get your Final Fantasy, which I feel has a little more distinct flavor, especially by the time you get to like Final Fantasy 3, where they do a lot more with like a point-based class system. And SMT is like its whole own other thing on this complete other wavelength. They were doing monster catcher games before basically anybody else was. Like, the idea of Pokemon, where you're like going around playing an RPG collecting monsters, that started
Yeah.
with either Shin Megami Tensei or a Shin Megami Tensei spin-off game of some sort. At some point, this game, it was like a dungeon crawler RPG where you go through dungeons and fight monsters, but you would talk to them and try to convince them to join your party to help you.
Yeah.
And mechanics were introduced. I don't know exactly the history of it, but mechanics were introduced where you would fuse your monsters to make them stronger, where you could do all sorts of different things with this fusion mechanic, and it just get more complicated and more complicated and more complicated. And then we get Persona, which is still Shin Megami Tensei, but with a more strict, like, you're a high school student kind of story. Whereas SMT was like, society has collapsed. This is the balance between good and evil. That's been kind of the core conceit of those games. Has been very like some mystery, some high school student stuff, to relationship sims, and a big ass dungeon. That's been their core conceit. So now, Josh, we have our third pillar.
We have our third pillar, and it definitely borrows from a lot of the tropes that SMT and Persona have kind of like set up for them as up to this point. So it's kind of like there's a basis of what you can expect from like an Atlas RPG at this point, right? This isn't just like stuff that's exclusive to Shin Megami Tensei and Persona. It's now like this is kind of like the bedrock foundation of what you can expect in one of these games, which is like, some kind of dungeon crawling element, and then like a turn-based system where you are where you have like a party where all of the where their powers can change kind of in flux, right? This game most especially, but like, in Persona at least you can change your own powers through different personas. So like,
and as well as in SMT, instead of like you directly getting the power of the persona, you are like forming a party of monsters. So it's not just like you and 4 other high school students who have their own personas and then you can switch yours out. Every one of your party members is like, you can summon and morph and do all this and that and the other with the summoning mechanic with SMT party member monsters.
But then also one of the common elements is this this sense of like talking to people being very important, right? Like a lot of the JRPGs, at least as far as I'm familiar with them, are, they're pretty linear and you don't get a lot of choice in what's being said and what isn't. But then in Shin Megami Tensei, you're trying to convince these monsters to join your party. That kind of
Well,
carries
and
over
on a
into
deeper level than
Persona.
that, you even have in the SMT games, it's very like three choices: good, evil, neutral. You're
Yeah,
you're influencing the world, the recreation of the world in a lot of the
yeah,
storylines in that sense.
yeah.
In
And that
Persona,
carries,
you get some of that
yeah.
flavor, but it's more directed in like specific interpersonal context.
Yeah. And I think that that's kind of the reason why Persona has kind of taken off in a way that Shin Megami Tensei hasn't, at least in the West. I'm not actually sure like which is more popular in Japan, but here in the West, Persona is kind of the bigger deal because I think it just like does something that a lot of other JRPGs don't do, which is have like a very kind of grounded interpersonal relationship system that invests people into the characters more as opposed
Right.
to SMT, which is just kind of like, a little bit more traditional in terms of JRPG.
And again, I think this is another thing that I can give props to Persona and therefore Metaphor, which we'll get
Mm,
into with the archetype system.
yeah.
But to its
I'm just,
credit, Persona is a very deep game on top of the relationship system rather than literally just being like a light novel with story options, which there are a lot of games that are light novels with story options. And
yeah.
for a lot of people, myself included, I just don't play those games. I like if I'm going to read a book or read a manga, I will just do so. I understand their place. However, I do like it when games incorporate when actual sorry, I don't want to be like disparaging, but like
Yeah.
actual games when like a game with deeper game mechanics beyond relationship systems add really deep and interesting relationship mechanics because it gives the characters kind of this twofold sense to them. They are being reinforced through their gameplay mechanics and through their skills and the things you see them do, and then they are being reinforced again through your direct interaction with them, the things you say to them, the moments you share with them. And I think that overall makes characters in basically any game those systems overlap in overall.
Yeah. And this game, I think, is like kind of the apotheosis of what they've been building to up to this point, right? Because like, not to be too disparaging towards Persona, but like those games, having the kind of high school setting, there's a bit of a juvenile atmosphere to them, right? At least as far as 5 is concerned, like it's kind of, like it deals with some heavy themes and some interesting stuff, but like it's also about a bunch of high schoolers who are, fighting the definitely evil guys who are you know,
Right.
who just need to be taught a lesson by getting the shit beat out of them in a or whatever, right? That's kind of the way that goes. But this feels like it's stepping out of those bounds and kind of trying to tell a bit more of a mature, nuanced story that kind of approaches political issues in a bit more of a dynamic and nuanced way, which I
Well,
think is the
very
real improvement.
pointedly, this is P Studio. I say P Studio. This is like very explicitly a different studio within Atlas, but it's
Yeah,
led by Katsura Hashino, who was the lead for P Studio from 2006 to 2016 for Persona 3, 4, and 5, and all of their iterations. Um,
yeah. They also have the character designer, Shigenori Soejima, who worked on basically all of these games, as well
right,
as
and
Catherine
Shoji
and a whole
Meguro.
other. Yeah, and then Shoji Meguro, who did SMT and Persona, right? So like all of these guys are kind of transitioning to this new studio and kind of
Right.
carrying over their
Every
influences.
if you see an Atlas game and you can tell it's an Atlas game, and it's because of these three people, and they
Yeah,
are all here together now working on this game. So this is what we've got. We'll get into a story synopsis in a little bit, but I think we're punching on some interesting points about gameplay systems that I want to keep talking
yeah,
about. Um, One of the main things that Metaphor does differently than SMT and Persona is that you are no longer trying to convince enemies into your party. That's just not a thing in this game.
Yeah.
It is also very pointedly the first fantasy game that these people have, like, they're like, we are going to do a fantasy game. It is going to be a
Yeah.
fantasy of our own. It is unlike a fantasy that you may be familiar with. In some ways
there's
it may be similar, but it is wholly unique.
Yeah, like I want to point on that for a second. So like
Yeah.
if you've seen like the original announcement video from like 2016 or 2017 or whatever, like right after Persona 5 happens, like
Mhm.
you can see like there are like hints and bits of what this game was going to be or it was eventually going to become, like especially with the metaphor side of the concept, but like it looked like a much more traditional fantasy story. And from what I've heard in interviews, they were originally trying to like build a more traditional fantasy world in more like a Tolkien-esque style. But then they realized that with the kind of themes they wanted to tell, that stuff was a bit limiting. So they ended up kind of creating something that's like, it has some of the same like similar like monster designs that or the monster archetypes that those Western mythologies have, like goblins and stuff like that. But
Sure,
like
there are
the
familiar
actual
aspects.
yeah, but then like the races themselves are pretty unique on their own, right? Like there's nothing really resembling a Clamar or a Ujif in most regular fantasy stories, and I feel
Right.
like that gives them the breadth to tell more interesting stories within it, and we can get into that later. But
I
continue.
think another thing that I and this is just another tangent. And again, be prepared for this because, like I said earlier, the last
Listen,
recording
man.
of this was 2 hours and 40 minutes. It's an Atlas game. It's ostensibly a new Persona ish.
Yeah.
So tangents is what this is made of. But kind of on the topic of races, so you've got and I'm putting air quotes on this for our audio listeners, but you've got people, which are your people races, which are your
Mhm.
Claymars and your Ujifs and your Papyrus,
Carapace.
Parapus.
Yeah.
There are a handful of different people races. And then you
Let me
have
look this up.
monsters, right? Like your goblins and your little teeth gremlins and your dragons and the things you would typically classify as a monster. Um, but then you have humans, and they're literally just these grotesque beings ripped straight out of Hieronymus Bosch paintings. Like
Yeah.
they are uncanny, they are unsettling, and if you can figure out how to spell Hieronymus Bosch, look up his works and just delve into that, because that in itself as a topic is more than I have time for.
Yeah, like the human designs of this game. I mean, first of all, we can talk about like, like it is one of these things that they had that this that at least Persona 5 had was a bit of an obviousness to its themes, right? Like it's not trying to like, you know, it's not trying to be too subtextual, right? It
Right.
often points out its own points and like puts very hard pins and things,
And
right?
then four different
Like
characters tell you the whole point of that dungeon was.
yeah, exactly. But like, with this it's like, oh, the real bad people in the world are us. Wow, that's so insightful. How crazy. That's what you think at first, right? But then there's there's an interesting scene that happens while you're traveling to some side dungeon, or at least when I did. You come
Sure.
across this mining town or something that was destroyed by a human, and
Mhm.
like, they talk about it like it's a natural disaster or something that's just this like unavoidable thing. And like, it does kind of like it did kind of bring me to this point where it's like, yeah, like, climate change is this thing, or like any number of things that like humans cause that either intentionally or not just cause destruction to people, right? And it's like, you know
We're looking
it
at you,
feels a little bit more
Oppenheimer.
poignant. Yeah, it it feels kind of poignant when they're talking about like human made destruction, a bit removed, but then it's like, oh, we're doing this to ourselves. Like it's just one of those things where it's
It,
like it's
it's so
obvious, but it still
it's
works when
so
you do it right.
Exactly. It's so blunt that it just bleeds away into the background. You don't even like consider it anymore, and you are just
Mhm.
within the world. So you're like, a human did that, and then you remove yourself from it and you're like, wait, I'm a human. What's the message this is trying to tell me? Cuz
Yeah,
it is so blunt. I almost miss it, It's
yeah,
kind of it's ridiculous.
yeah. Like I think things these days try to be subtle, and like subtlety has its place, but like at the same time, I think sometimes people make things so subtle that they actually stray away from making important points as a result, or like just like integrating things into the world in a way that like feels interesting.
Well,
You
and I will
know?
say this is blunt in a different way than Persona 5 was blunt, in that this
Yeah,
is blunt like, ooh, I got the wind knocked out of me. You're being silly, but you made a good point.
yeah,
Versus P5 blunt, where it's like, okay, each individual character is going to take a turn with the talking brick and then hit me over the head with it.
yeah. Like how many times do we have to have Yusuke talk about how betrayed he was by his art teacher or whatever, and now he has no honor. But yeah, whatever. I love that game still, but
It's a good game. It has its flaws. I mean, like, the art design in P5, this is not the P5 hate corner, but I'm going to
no,
be
it's
very
not.
brief here. I like P5. I think with the existence of P3 Reload, there's not much reason to play P5, because that brings a better game up to the level of like the newer game with the better art direction and the cooler music, even though I really like the P3 original soundtrack, and I'm kind of sad that they took some of that music out of the new game, and the only
Yeah.
way that you can listen to it is by paying for the bonus soundtrack, but whatever. Play P3 Reload, man. It's out there. Go play it.
Whenever I have another 100 hours to drop on a on an Atlas RPG,
No,
I'll
for
I'll do
real.
it.
Um, but I think I do want to take a minute to talk about one of the primary mechanical differences that makes Metaphor, in my opinion, slightly more engaging and less like tedious to engage with,
Mhm.
is the archetype system. So this is the fundamental like power system change that they've done between SMT and Persona and Metaphor. So it's
Yeah,
most closely related to Persona, so I'm going to stick with that. But now, instead of, okay, I go to a dungeon, I talk to 300 different monsters, I get about 40 of them into my party, 30 of them go into a box. I go to the box, I put as much of the stuff, I fuse it together in the box, I pick the best three, and
yeah,
instead of doing all of that just to like get a new persona and get something that might be slightly a little bit better than the last persona I had, but it's missing some of the abilities that were really useful for me, and it's got some
yep.
of these new abilities that may or may not be so like, and I
And
enjoy engaging with that system in Persona, okay? I enjoy
yeah,
engaging with it in SMT, okay? I wish the two had a different system, but now we do have a new system, and it's more of a class-based system, kind of like what you see in some of the later Dragon Quests or in like a handful of the Final Fantasy games. I think it's closer to the Final Fantasy games. It works in that like every time you create a new connection with somebody in the world, which is signified,
yeah,
you get a new follower, is I think the terminology
yeah,
for it. Which
mhm,
is just key characters who, you can have an influence on their plot line, they will have an influence on yours. You can have actual, like, not actual, but like they have like, plotted discussions that you have influence over, and as part of that connection with one another, you have formed a new power, which is an archetype. And we'll
yeah,
talk kind of more about the lore of this when we get into the story beats, but for now it's gameplay stuff. So
yeah,
when you form a relationship with a character, as you develop that relationship, your archetype gets stronger, and that archetype is manifested as a JoJo stand, a persona, whatever you want to call it, an archetype. Um,
yeah.
it's a magic being that stands beside you in battle, and it helps you do crazy magic abilities. We'll get into that later, because put a pin in the phrase evokers. We'll come back to that. Or invokers.
Elaborate. What is that? Sorry.
The magical, the pendants and objects that are required to use magic in this world if you
Those
don't
are
have an archetype.
igniters.
Evokers are the guns you shoot yourself in P3. Sorry.
We gotta love
so
proper nouns. There are
igniters.
gonna be so many in this game.
God. So you have this class system, right? And it's based on, like, in Persona, how your party members' personas, their level was influenced by your relationship with them. In this, the archetypes that are related to any given person are developed for everyone. Any given playable character can select any archetype outside of battle at any time. You can level them up at any time. You can switch abilities at any time. Any classes that you've already gotten mastery levels in, you can pick abilities from them to try and double class onto something else. Each class, as you develop your relationship with the person that you've developed the archetype with, the class will evolve. So you go from, like, just as an example, knight to magic knight, or seeker to magic seeker. Those are, like, the two primary examples that I've most recently engaged with, so I'm bringing them up. And they have, like, a third stage beyond that, which I haven't reached yet, obviously. But between the class system being so fluid and dynamic as it is on its own, but then adding the extra systems on top of the relationships evolving the archetypes.
Yeah, and the skill inheritance.
It's almost perfect, right? So, like, you have great class systems in games like Bravely Default, in Final Fantasy V, in Final Fantasy 12 even. There's a ridiculous job board system. I think Final Fantasy 12, and I think especially, like, something like Xenoblade Chronicles 3 are way off the deep end. They have like all this class customization, like anybody can play any class, anybody can get, any ability. They have that. They have way too much going on. This is not a simple system, but it is so boiled down to exactly what it needs to be and nothing else that I can barely criticize it. I've been talking for a long time now, and I'm going to open the floor to what you think about, like, the whole system as I've described it. But, like, I'm having such a good time with it as a system.
Yeah, like, so the last time we recorded this, I kind of pushed back just slightly and was like, I think that the persona system has its merits, and I think that the archetype system is, like, definitely interesting and, like, gives you a bit more fluidity, especially early on in the game, where, like, you don't have as many characters in your party, so there's not as much, fluidity in terms of how your what kind of powers they can have, and, like, what kind of abilities they can use in battle, right? Like,
Right.
This game or these games rely on, kind of like strengths and weaknesses kind of thing, where it's like, every single enemy has its own weakness or whatever, and then you just have to find the one elemental attack that will do the most damage, and just keep doing that to them until they die.
Right. And just to punch in on that for just 1 second, the press turn system, which is what he's describing, is a staple of the SMT series and you get a turn icon for each of your characters in your party. And if you do a critical attack or something that is effective against an enemy's weakness, you only use half your turn icon. So you can effectively, if you play right, double the amount of moves you can do in a turn phase.
Yeah, but then also if your enemy dodges, it takes out 2, like that sort of thing, right?
If you miss, if they dodge, if they're ineffective, you lose 2 coins or 3 coins or all your coins or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. But, but, like, at the time I was like, well, it's not really all that different, because if you don't like the build of your party, you can just kind of like swap out your characters, right? You know,
Mm,
if you need, just to use Persona 5 parlance, if you need nuclear attacks on a specific enemy, just like, you know, just swap Makoto in, you know, and you'll be
right.
fine, right? You know, I would say it effectively does the same thing, but I think in this game there is such a there is a greater fluidity that is coming into the coming through the classes, right? Because, you know, not only can I swap Leon to whatever specific archetype I want to and get different powers as a result, but then as you're getting these other like sub archetypes that kind of stack onto each other, like some of them, in order to unlock them, you need to have skills in two different archetypes, and then they kind of
Mhm.
combine together. So like, you know, you need to have somebody who's already kind of like proficient in one and then get them proficient in another to get that third one, right? You know,
Right.
and
Well,
like,
and that's the other thing, is that it's gated by not only progression in the base class, but progression in another related class. And so it starts to bring in, I hope, I'm not sure, I hope it develops in this way later into the game, but
mhm,
it starts playing with this idea that like the relationships between those characters will be important, because like,
yeah,
okay, the Maria, the mage archetype, and Katarina, or I guess even, you know, Hulkenberg, the knight archetype, you know, there must be a
yeah,
relationship there for them to form, or even if that's just a relationship through the founding character protagonist,
yeah,
you know, Will, I guess, for the argument.
mhm.
If that's a development through, I don't know, we might get there, we might not, but it does play with the idea that like it is important to help other people form relationships as well, because like you get
I would
to get magic knight, you have to be leveled in mage and leveled in knight on the same character to unlock the second node on the knight branch.
if there is a Hulkenberg and Maria crossover events plot line that I can get to in this game, this will be the best game I've ever played. Like, just flat out, never been anything better. Like, you know, Arkham Asylum, get the out of here. The Last of Us, get the out of here. Every Mario, get the out of here. Like, you know, just all of it out.
Goodbye.
Just
Well,
let me have tall girl and sad little Victorian girl together. Okay? Let me have that personally. But yeah, and the other thing about that is that there's the skill inheritance thing where like, so if you let's say that I start off a character with the healer archetype and they get a bunch of healing abilities, right?
sure.
And then I want to switch them to another thing, was, well, in other games it would be like, well, none of their powers kind of cross over, right? You have to either choose all healing abilities or choose all fire abilities or whatever. But if I want to
Right.
choose the fire archetype or whatever, I can carry over one or two healing classes from them because they've already, or healing skills from them because I've already had them. So it gives you a greater sense of like flexibility in the game, where it's like, oh, I can really like min max the powers here to like, you know, so that I can have like two or three characters with healing abilities, and you know, it just synergizes in a way that's really cool. And then we haven't even gotten to synthesis, which is like you know, the all out attacks times three. You know, you can
Yeah,
literally
so
do them
like,
whenever you want.
right, it's basically, I mean, it's almost a system directly ripped from Chrono Trigger. So
Yeah,
depending on who you have in your party and what classes they have equipped, and even more granular, what abilities they have unlocked and equipped, you can just do a synthesis. You can say, okay, I'm going to spend 2 turn icons this turn to do a move that hits everybody on the screen with ice magic or whatever, you know, like
yeah.
they're, and they all have unique cuts, not all, like they're
Most of them
like
have unique
the
cutscenes.
most of them have a unique cutscene, and they are all like on, like they're factor dependent, so you'll get a unique cutscene pretty much anytime you click an ability with a new name, you know.
Yeah, just Man, they
And like you
really
said, like as long as you've got the turn icons and the right people in your party, press
yeah,
X on the controller and you just do a synthesis ability.
exactly. And like they plussed up the combat so much in this game that it's like I don't ever go into a scenario having no clue what I'm going to do, right?
Mhm.
Like, even if I am not prepared and even if I lose, right? Like it's, a new option is just a kind of a couple button presses away. And there are so many options the game gives you that you're rarely ever in an instance where it's like, I can't do anything.
Right.
And on top of that, the game is very generous about like, giving you save points right before a big boss or whatever. So like
Right.
if you do have the wrong build out going into a big battle, you can just be like, well, I'll go back to the save point, I'll change up everything, and then I'll go back into it. You know?
God, I've been getting diced using ice magic all dungeon long. I really hope this boss doesn't have an immunity to ice magic.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. And like
Right. What
I
and
will
and what
say,
it doesn't do is give you the baby baton pass where you can just pick whatever character at any point in the battle and just say, okay, your turn now. I get to pick whose turn it is and just wipe the floor with everybody by using the one ability on Joker 14 times in a row. Like, shut up, dude.
okay, come on now. Let's not on baton pass, okay? Baton
I'm
pass
sorry.
is a good mechanic. Especially since you
Baton
can't give it to the
pass,
same person more than once in a turn, right?
I enjoy playing with baton pass in Persona 5. I think it having played games with press turn systems in them since Nocturne, I have always not always, but like for a while now, I have been able to manipulate the press turn system in a way that I can fight a couple levels above my level most of
Hmm.
the time. Like unless I'm just like blindsided, um
Yeah.
I can generally get away with going in a couple levels under. Just on the press turn system. When you give me baton pass, the game is trivial.
Yeah, and like Persona 5 is a lot easier than this game for that reason, and also because I think that game just gives you way more MP items, which was the thing that I was
Oh,
bumping
for
up
sure.
with on this game. But like I do think that's kind of the intended experience, right? It's just this game is way more, like, okay, well, you go into a dungeon, you go as far as you can, and then you just kind of give up and go back, and then you'll come back to that point later on, right?
Right.
That's the kind of thing it's doing, as opposed to Persona 5, or at least Persona 5 Royal, they probably did some patching or did some rebalancing for that game, and I imagine that might be why it's easier. But in Persona 5 Royal, you really could get through just about any dungeon in one go if you really wanted to, as long as there wasn't like a point in the game where the game told you, okay, you can't go any further until you do this thing in the outside
Right.
world.
Unless there was some story reason that you had to leave the dungeon. I
Yeah,
was getting I was at least getting to every one of those checkpoints in one run every time I entered a dungeon in P5. And at the
yeah,
very worst, I would have to like go in, hit the save point, fight the boss one time, realize my build is come out, go in the next day and sweep the boss.
yeah. I guess it's just kind of what you want, but I do feel like I'm getting a bit more reward out of this experience because I have to kind of like,
You have to
I have
try a
to
little
actually
harder.
care. Yeah, I have to actually care about, my MP and my items and just kind of like the build of my party, right?
Well, and that's the
And
thing because the builds are so free form. You have to have put consideration before you even get into a battle. You have to put consideration into whether or not your team has abilities that can support one another.
and not only that, but you literally have to like put into the thought of like, so there there's a system in the game that I don't think is in any other Persona game or anything like that, where basically you can talk to informants before you go on a dungeon or whatever and be like, okay,
Mhm.
what's the deal with the enemies who are going to be here? What things am I going to avoid or whatever? And at one point the guy was like, don't bring anybody with a magic wand or whatever they call it, into this, right?
Right.
Because the goblins there will make them twice as angry. And I was like,
Right.
okay, so I literally have to avoid this class, and this class
Right.
in order
Anything
to.
that uses this specific kind of equipment, I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
I have to make sure that they are. You have to build around it to make sure
that's the
that
level
you
of
aren't,
consideration you
or
need.
with it and just outbuild the challenge. You know.
Yeah, this game is so good. Oh my god, on a mechanical level, it's so crazy. And like, okay, so there's those mechanics. There's the combat mechanics, right? And then the other two kinds of
Right.
mechanics we can talk about a bit are the kind of like the dialogue mechanics and stuff,
Well,
which
we haven't even
are
finished
probably
all the
the least.
combat mechanics because there's overworld combat.
Oh yeah, there is overworld combat. That's right. They finally added like overworld combat, which like I love this hybrid design of combat where like, you have the turn-based system for more powerful enemies, but then if you're just grinding through, little skeletons or whatever that you don't
Right.
want
If
to
you go
deal
back
with.
to the first zone just to try and pick up a couple items and you're way over leveled for those dudes now, you can just and they're dead.
Yeah.
Now, I
Yeah.
will say I nitpick the combat system could feel a little better in the
It could.
overworld combat. I understand this is the first time they've done this and
Hmm.
the character does move very quickly, so like getting a grasp on the camera and then changing the combat, like I
Yeah.
understand it can be challenging, and this being the first time they've done it, I like the direction.
Yeah.
It is a little clunky. You don't engage with it enough around high level enemy, or I mean, unless you're, you know, like me, big baller, and just like ballsy like that, and want to try and swing your sword at every single enemy before you get into an encounter
Yeah.
with it. You absolutely can. And if you do it, you get a little like bonus into the battle. You get like a splash screen and you can engage at a
Yep.
certain time, and it gives you like they're either stunned or something. It gives the enemy a debuff to the point that you have advantage going into the battle. But like you don't have to. You can just start any battle at any engagement. You just press triangle and you go right in.
Yeah.
Um
But also on the flip side, if a powerful enemy gets the edge on you, then you go into basically like the
right, you
peril.
take disadvantage.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I like that. I don't even think this is a matter of like random enemy spawns, because as far as I can tell, most of the enemy placements in the dungeon have been fairly, I don't want to say scripted, but it's like, okay, you go into this room and it's like there's a handful of enemies patrolling the left wing, or like it seems like they're fairly intentionally placed for the most part.
Mhm.
And I understand for a lot of RPGs that use random enemy placement, it may not be as easy to get away with to do a system like this, but it just makes so much sense that like you do have some engagement with a combat system when you fight an enemy. You don't just run into them and then they blow up, kind of like I've seen other games where it's like if you get to a high enough level you run into an enemy and they just blow up and you get the experience.
Yeah.
This has the clear indication that it's like, okay, I'm engaging this enemy in combat, I'm fighting them, I beat them,
Yeah.
I get the experience, whether that is overworld or in turn-based. I want to see it a little more polished, but I'm glad we're finally getting things that are stepping in this direction.
Yep. Just
And
wait
with that, I
until
think we have
the Metaphor ReFantazio Premium Plus Edition or whatever they're going to call it, and they tweak all the combat and everything, and probably make it feel 20 times better. Or they add an extra story DLC on top of it.
yeah. But
Because
with
they're
that,
gonna
I
do it.
do think we've kind of polished off most of the like combat
Yeah,
mechanics stuff.
yeah. Like, so there's the three mechanical sides of the game. There's the combat, then there's the exploration, and then there's the dialogue systems. And I would say that the dialogue systems are the ones that are like the least changed from Persona so far as I've
Sure,
seen.
and why
Right? Like,
broke what ain't like why fix what ain't broke? Because it's like
yeah, it's pretty
at
good.
the end of the day, the persona character interaction system is the best character interaction I've played with in any RPG that has a character interaction system like that.
I
So
mean,
keep it up.
I will say, like, I wish there was like a little more choice to like build around like your character and try to like make your character more specific, right? Like if you look at like
Sure.
more Western RPGs, like Bioware games or Baldur's Gate or whatever, like those games give you like a lot of choice as to how your character expresses themselves, and like that changes the world around you. And this game is like kind of like doing some kind of in between thing where it's like they're giving you options, and the options have some effect, but like it doesn't change really how the characters perceive you in any meaningful way, right? And it would be
Right.
cool to kind of like see that a bit more. I mean, there's also the possibility that we're just not far enough to see the ramifications of my dialogue choices, but
There's the very distinct possibility that I could have said something about 10 hours ago that in about another 180 hours is gonna royally my entire playthrough.
yeah, but like one thing I will say about this game that I think does take it up a notch a little bit from the previous systems is that your character is actually voiced this time,
Right.
right?
Oh, and you do have a lot more dialogue options as far as I can tell. Like just in moment to moment gameplay and in general dialogue scenes. And I don't know how much of this is a matter of you have your own voice like you're mentioning, and how much of it is like there's not a Morgana there to speak for you. But yeah, just like
Yeah,
being able
like
to speak for yourself.
yeah, like Gallica kind of fills that role, right? She's kind of like your guide through the world, and like I think there was only really one cutscene where I felt like she was kind of like speaking for me the way Morgana normally would, where she's like
Sure.
she's telling me what I'm doing instead of letting me like choose my own actions or choose what I'm saying and then I say it verbally, you know,
Mm,
as opposed to like Persona 5 where you feel like kind of a real blank slate, right? You
right.
know, Will has a little more going on with him, but like I would like to know a little bit more about him because like it seems like there's kind of like an air of mystery to him, and like he actually has like a real story and reason for being involved in the plot as opposed to
Excuse me.
uh as opposed to the protagonist of Persona 5 who is just kind of there because he was mistaken for some kind of truant or something, and now he's at a different school, right? you
Right.
know it, he's a little bit more of a character this time around. That's
Sure.
probably the biggest improvement I've seen so far. I will say one interesting thing I've noticed is that
Mm.
every time you have one of these character interactions, so like every single follower you have like these kind of like these side stories with them, and every time you like meet up with them and like interact with them, it goes through like a chapter of that side story, right? And you can like literally see like how much of the story has been completed in like a little progress bar. For some reason these are 8 chapters long instead of the 10 Persona is, right? And I'm wondering if they're leaving themselves a little bit more room for the expanded version or what. Or maybe it's because, interestingly, in this game, you can't romance anybody, as opposed to in Persona 5, or in previous Persona games where you can, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You
Usually at rank
yeah.
9. Usually at
I
rank 9 is
mean,
when you can, like, finally put, like, the final little Riz juice in there and, get a relationship started.
personally, I'm pretty glad I'm not going to be like I'm not going to have the pressure in the back of my head that says you never went through with that full dating relationship with that teacher, did you?
Yeah, never that FOMO, but at the same time, I always felt like, you know, that relationship side of things in Persona was a little bit lacking, right? Because it's like, you only get to that point at the end of their arc. And like
Mm,
obviously if you were able to do that from the start, then that could probably like diverge a lot of things in that story, and so they'd have to do a lot more content for it. But at the same
right.
time, if I romance a character, I'm doing it very intentionally, and I don't want that to be like basically the end of our story together, right?
Right.
Because
Right,
then
because like,
how
okay,
then I
now
do
I've
it.
romanced you. Now what? Like, we don't go on
Yeah,
any cute dates or anything. Like, we already did all the cute dates before we were dating. Like, what?
yeah, and like yeah, you could technically take your girlfriend on a date in Persona 5, but like it didn't accomplish anything, and like you always felt like you were wasting your time doing it when you could be
Right,
talking
because
to
it's like,
somebody else
okay,
or like
I could just be talking to my girlfriend, or like I've got 15 other characters that I need to get my confidant up with. So like,
Yeah. It would be cool if, if you started dating somebody, if they just kind of like started showing up with you in other people's side quests and having, having their own little dialogue interstitials in there too, And like even if it didn't really affect anything, it would be like, okay, at least I'm hanging out with my girlfriend and seeing unique
right? Oh, my
dialogue,
girlfriend's
right?
here. Yay!
That'd be
You know,
something. But
something.
yeah, but oh well. I do like that they don't really have romance options in this game, despite how fucking hot everybody is in this game.
Well, that's
You
the other
know,
thing is you're trying to be the king. You don't really want to be sleeping with your royal cabinet for the most part.
hey, speak for yourself, buddy. But
I mean, listen, not everybody's going to be JFK.
but yeah, like I do think in a story more about kind of like political intrigue, it makes a little less sense for people to be kind of dating each other, you know, in between battles, as opposed to like high schoolers who are all like horny and just like
Right. High schoolers and high school medics and high school teachers.
yeah. But of course,
Yeah,
as an
Persona 5.
adult, it's disappointing that I cannot date the other hot adults in this video game, in this RPG game.
Josh, if you could date one of the characters in Metaphor ReFantazio, which character would you date?
That's a tough question. While I think about that, I will talk about there was the same question was posed on Reddit. I saw on the Metaphor Fantasio Reddit, and one person said, "Hey, Fabienne is looking for is looking for somebody right now."
I will always be there for Fabian, but I cannot step in on my man Grius after he died literally because of me.
Hey, look, bro wouldn't want her to be alone, okay?
Oh my god.
Bro, with friends like these.
With friends like these, that's crazy. He wouldn't want her to be alone. That's insane.
Man, that is tough. I don't know. What do you think?
Brigida.
Brigida? That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Sugar mommy.
I think Brigida is a little bit too intimidating for me. Like, I want a little bit of intimidation, but I need, like, I don't want, like, you might kill me at any second intimidation.
We're gonna crack that shell any second now. It's like I'm babysitting the dog. Like, it's going great. We're gonna crack that shell any second now. She almost smiled at me the last time I went to see her. So,
man, I think I've gotten a little bit further in that dog plot line than you, and I'm just gonna say, get yourself ready for that emotionally. But yeah, Hulkenberg's a good choice. She's a career woman, but like she has her principles that she will stand by. Let me think. Heismay, similarly very honorable. The height thing is a bit of an issue, but I think we can make it work.
We cannot keep letting the tall people get away with everything. Heismay deserves the world.
Heismay deserves a committed male wife, and honestly, just hit me up, dude. Anyways,
male wife. That caught me off guard. Sorry.
Let's actually get into like the meat and potatoes of the game itself. All right, the also the overworld exploration part of things, right, is a third gameplay thing, right? This is a little less gameplay, but also like there are interesting like mechanical things I want to talk about. So like in Persona, you're just kind of in a city, right? And you go to places in the city and do stuff. And this game has that too. But there are multiple different cities, each with, like common things, right? Like, like armories and, potion shops and stuff like that. But they all also have their own unique things that you can only do in each individual city. And so you need a way to get to and from those cities. And the solution to that they bring is the Gauntlet Runner, which is basically like a tour bus,
Mm-hmm. And the Gauntlet Runner's pilot named Nuris.
drunkard mad scientist,
Dope sailor get up.
Yeah, who if you pick Nuress as your as the character you want to date, you're the freak. Okay.
Come on.
But
But and I will say there are some interesting twists to this. And it's like back in the day, the SMT games was like literally arrow icon on a map. And it's like that's how you got around. But it's like now you have like full 3D locomotion in like
yeah,
multiple different open world zones. But then you also have like the different like regional maps where you've got the towns and it's like you've got initially I was really concerned about this because it sets this up where it's like, okay, we've got the Gauntlet Runner, we've got a place that's like 3 days away, we got to stop, we got to set up camp, we've got to do this, that, and the other. We have to have time management in mind from getting from point A to point B just to complete this mission. So I was like, okay, on a calendar system like we have in Metaphor, like we had in Persona, that's going to change a lot of things. That's going to make things very interesting in terms of like objectives and time management. In cases it does, but we'll get into it in a second. But it's also interesting opportunity to allow you specific time just to interact with your party members.
Yeah.
And for that, I appreciate it. But the twist to what I was saying a second ago about the time management thing is that fairly early on, like by the time you get to, I want to say the second town, Martira, is that how you pronounce it?
Martira, yes, that's correct.
You unlock the ability to teleport because Will is the special protagonist boy, and there's some ancient arcane engine in the back of Nurse's
the back of the Gauntlet Runner.
Right. Well, and this Gauntlet Runner, one of the things that we should probably touch on about the story is that this is kind of the broad sweeps that I'll cover real quick. The king has been killed. He has magically set up a tournament that will choose by popularity the next king of the nation. The reason we are in this position is because Louis killed him. Louis cursed the prince, so there is currently no next of kin because the prince is laid up in bed, cursed, possibly dead. And Will is part of a secret organization that is set out to try and take down Louis so that we can revive the prince and set the rightful king enthroned. And that's just like the 2-sentence synopsis of the first 30 hours of this game.
Basically. But yeah, like you were saying, like, so, I was having that worry as the Gauntlet Runner thing was kind of coming up, that's like, oh, so I have all these other people over here who are in Grand Trad, the first city, and I want to do my side quest with them, but
it's like not even to mention the relationships that you got to keep up with in old cities and then go to new cities to do quests.
Yeah, but then this teleportation thing, which is like it's a little bit Deus Ex Machina, whatever, but like it affords you the ability to at least be like, okay, I can teleport to places that I've already been, and I can spend time with people there, right? And so it gives you a little bit more leeway to like to explore these things at your leisure. But then whenever you need to go to a new place, you have to take the time to to get the Gauntlet Runner going, right? And and yeah, like you said, kind of like the road trip parts of things are kind of fun because not only does it kind of like accurately portray how a road trip feels, where it's like, you have the person who's driving and obviously they're being occupied, but then you're just kind of there and you have to find something to do,
Right.
So
I really do like this system because, again, I mean, just like the archetype system, it has just enough going on that it's like, okay, I actively need to manage this and pay attention to it. And I need to be on top of what I'm doing in my missions and in the world. And overall, it's just another string that is being pulled on at all times. Like, there is a deadline that I need to make it to somewhere eventually, and I've not been there yet. So the Gauntlet Runner's got to get going, and we got to get there. And just that slight extra tension that will pull you along just like forever. Like you will always have another place to go to. But then you also do at the end of the day, if you're like, okay, today was a day where I went shopping and there are extra deals in Grand Trad. So I'm just going to teleport back to Grand Trad, do some shopping there. Hit up a relationship marker with Maria and then go over in the evening and play card games with Hulkenberg. You know, like it gives you it still allows you full freedom to do what you need to do while also giving you the pressure on like, okay, you still need to be worried about what's next. And like you need to manage your time accordingly.
Yep, because there's all these like these extraneous factors, right? Every quest, whether it's a main quest or a side quest, has a deadline, right? Like even little things like there's some kid in one of the towns who I was talking to, and he was like, I want to get my friend some flowers for their birthday, and I was like, okay, cool, I'll get you some flowers. There's obviously a deadline because it's for his birthday, so you can't give him the flowers before the kid's birthday, right? So it's always adding that little pressure. And then, when you're exploring, there's the weather system, right? Where every day, every single individual location has its own weather. And so you have to check with the weather person at every town to be like, okay, what's the weather going to be? And
that's the other thing too. The locations are so unique that each location has individual weather patterns, and those individual weather patterns will like tangibly change the way the map plays and looks.
Yeah, it's so great where like it gives you so much freedom, but then like it gives you all these factors to consider when you're going into doing anything, and it's like it just feels so excellent to play all of the time. And it's genuinely one of those things where it's like, where do they improve from here, really? Like I thought Persona 5 Royal was perfect when I played it, and now I'm looking at this and I'm looking back at that and I'm like, that thing was
what a steaming pile of dog.
That guy was holding up by two peg legs, hobbling around Captain Kidd style. But
Captain
Kidd. Thanks, Ryuji. But yeah, just like feels so good to play, man. Feels so good. It makes it hard to go back to any other RPG because it's just like, what can I play that won't feel worse than this to me? It's tough, man. It's really tough. But we can use that to kind of like transition to more of the narrative and the art stuff that's going on in this game. So like you said, the game starts with an assassination, right? Louis stabs the king, pull up his name.
Again, last warning. Full story spoilers from the beginning of the game until Brylehaven.
Yeah, approximately 30 hours. But, Hythlodeus V is dead. He is gone. There is no king, and Louis is seeking to be throned the king in this power vacuum. Of course, because also he puts this hex on the prince that basically turns him into Sleeping Beauty. He can't do anything, and people presume he's dead.
Right.
But so you, being one of the prince's friends, starts he kind of gets embroiled into this plot to overthrow or to kill King Louis. Or to kill just Louis, I guess he's not king yet.
Right.
Kill him before he becomes the king, so that at the very least, this guy who killed him just to usurp power won't get in his place, right? And in order to do that, you join the military in order to kind of get closer to him, right?
Right. So you make your way into Grand Trad, and you go up to the recruitment center, accompanied by your best friend and fairy named Gallica, who is providing the diegetic music for our journey.
Oh yeah.
In the recruitment center, you get racist against. Everybody says, wow, you are not as good as I am because your race is different. And you're like, come on, guys. I started playing this game 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, like,
so
let's talk about the cast the caste system in this game, right? Caste
Sure.
with an E at the end. We can talk about the cast later, but we're talking about the cast now. So in this world, there's essentially like a hierarchy of classes, or at the very least, like some classes that are allowed to, get the highest positions of power, right?
Sure.
Let me just pull up this list. Like the Clamar and the Rusants are generally like the most well-off tribes, right?
Sure.
They're the ones that are allowed to have high positions of power in the church, in the state, anywhere really. And then everybody else is kind of just like, picking up scraps where they can, like
You're a Parapus? You're an Elda? You're an Ujif? Get out of
yeah.
here.
Which, like, do you want to say, this is How to Otaku's first furry content, because a lot of these races are, anthropomorphized to some degree, right? Especially the Parapus, right?
Especially the
They're all
Parapus. But then
'cause,
also, if you're a little freak like Josh is apparently and wants a
yeah,
Ujif man wife,
look, if he consents,
Josh, I
yeah,
did
but like
promise you we would get to Furry Detective eventually. Oh God, what's that show called?
good question.
Stars.
Beastars, yeah, we'll get there at some point. And what's the tribe where like everybody has like a
I cannot
metal trap
remember.
on their head?
I cannot remember the name of those guys. And here's the thing, I feel like that's gonna become like ridiculously important later for like almost no reason. And I can't say why because it's just a
Yeah.
hunch, but I can't remember what they're called. I don't believe it's a racial thing. I thought they were a religion.
Oh, really? That might be. I might need to double check on those because like there aren't any significant characters in that group to this point yet. Just a couple of side characters you meet in Grand Trad, really. Hey everyone, editing Josh from the future here. So the race in this that have the big cages over their heads are called the Mustari. We haven't really interacted with them much in the game. They're going to become a bigger part seemingly in the near future. So yeah, they're the Mustari. They're a different tribe. They wear big cages over their heads because they have a third eye that's kind of off-putting to other people, I guess. Anyways, back to them. But yeah, like you're introduced to Grand Trad through the hanging of a Parapus
Right.
who is presumably innocent of a crime that he is being tried for, right? And then you're also like immediately after that you see a Parapus on the street who is like begging you for money, right?
Right.
It immediately sets up like the kind of like, we're basically living in, like I guess Jim Crow is kind of the best summary for this, right? Like they technically have rights, but like anything could happen to them at any point, and there's not much this the system is not going to help you at any point,
Right.
and like it obviously, Japan has a very different relationship with race than we do, like they're a bit more isolationist
There
as
are
far
about
as history is concerned.
Right. There are about 10 non-Japanese people on the entire island.
Yeah, so like it is interesting for them to kind of like tackle that, and like I'm not going to say that this game yet has like great nuance to it, but it's not offending any American sensibilities, right? It's doing it pretty well,
Sure.
and obviously like they can kind of substitute for anything you want, right? It's any kind of politically persecuted class of any kind, but like
Mhm.
you know but race is obviously like the closest thing we have because they're called
Right.
tribes, and tribes and races are kind of close, right?
Sure.
It's just it's doing something interesting that I feel like Persona 5 didn't do, where it's like, that game is kind of tackling class in a way, but like in a very, modern Japan, there's the token white girl and that's it.
It's right. It's very much Persona 5 feels to me very much like they say that the nail that sticks out is the one that gets hammered in first. Well, I'm not even in the board right now, dude. Like I feel like that's what's going on a lot with Persona 5. Whereas this is trying to tackle political topics and like broad what people consider real world issues, but from a lens of fantasy. Like
Yeah,
you are getting in political debates with people, and you are, you're trying to solve racial inequality. And
yeah. I forget what the specific quote was that Hashino said in an interview I watched, but he said something like when he was researching fantasy as a genre,
Mhm.
he was kind of interested in the idea that like fantasy is fantasy isn't merely escapism. It's a it's a reflection of our real world and a way for us to kind of process a potentially better reality, right?
Right.
And
Well, and
the
that
game
and they
makes
they kind of hit you with that thesis statement at like the very beginning. They're like, so like, what do you think about fantasy? Do you think fantasy is like, do you
yeah.
think like our fantasies tangibly have a difference in the world, or do you think it's all kind of like just like stories for stories' sakes, and stories are fun but not really important? And
Yeah, or even just like, stories are nice, but like they can't have any tangible effect, right?
right.
They don't
And depending
they
on what
don't
you say, it's either like, oh yeah, that's the right. Yeah, you get what we're coming with, or it's like, we think you're pretty close-minded and kind of dumb. So like sit down and listen up.
Yeah, but like and then also like throughout the story you have this book with you that is,
Mhm.
like it is a utopian world that is certainly inspired by our own world where there's like it's a modern society with like skyscrapers and cars and but also like a democratic system where people choose their own leaders and everybody's value is determined by their actions and not by any status of birth or wealth, right? That sort of stuff, right?
Right.
And it makes text the idea that that fiction is a resemblance of our real world and that it's what we can aspire to be, or at least see through a lens what we want. And
Right.
while this game isn't as aspirational and utopic as the novel in that world is, it's still serving the same function of like representing a reality we might strive for, right?
Right. I mean,
And that will become
it's
more
just
true.
holding up a mirror to, it's a
Yeah,
reflection. It is
yeah,
meant to kind of show us like, okay, these are not the problems we face, but they are meant to be analogous to the problems that we face. Face these problems and come to your own determination. See if you can, as far as I can tell, I mean, like I said, we're only
yeah,
30 hours in, and those are some pretty broad concepts to be swinging with in a JRPG to begin with.
yeah,
So we'll see where it goes with that. But I mean, I know the thesis. I don't know, the
yeah,
conclusion, right?
yep,
Um, but it is fully meant to just be a mirror to us. It is like, okay, these are problems. Look at these problems and like
mhm,
consider these problems in a slightly different light and see if you have any ideas about your own life,
yep, that sort of thing. And but anyway, back to like the plot at hand. So like once you're conscripted into this army, you and Gallica and then another fellow conscriptee, Stroll, who's this nobleman of Clamar descent who is like, you know, kind of the most woke of the upper class people that you might know.
right.
The
The one good nepo baby.
exactly, though he doesn't really have any of his nepo baby connections really because his whole town got destroyed and his parents died with him.
Right.
But
And the one guy that you meet in Grand Trad that he's like, I know that guy and I'm going to talk to him and he's going to help us out, is like, why would I help you out? You don't have a town anymore.
yeah, poor guy. But yeah, you and this other conscriptee going to this fort or whatever, and turns out basically like a false flag operation is going on where like, there's a human there that Louis sent there to basically wait for that battalion to come out and then get murdered by, so that Luis would have reason to basically declare martial law, take the throne, and
Right.
usurp power that way, right? but what he doesn't expect is that you're such a cool and badass person because of this book that you read that you can summon an archetype, which
Right.
is, you know, not so subtly a reflection of the theme as a whole, that, that with the power of the book and, the understanding of media literacy skills, you too can become powerful enough to take on the problems of the real world, right?
Right. You, with a little bit of media literacy and a little bit of, empathy and understanding, can defeat real human problems. Do you get it yet?
Yeah,
But yeah,
but
so
yeah,
you get to
so
this point where you become the first person to ever defeat a human other than Louis.
yeah,
And this puts us in a pretty interesting position because what we didn't know while we were out getting conscript was that the king has set in play these grand machinations of a tournament. Not the king himself, the church sets up the tournament, but the king, who is dead now, had a magic spell that makes it so that all the people in the world are now in a competition with one another to see who the
yeah.
most popular person is, and the most popular person will be crowned king of the world. I don't even know where to begin. I don't even know how to start. I don't know, the timeline on it is kind of weird as well because you kill the human at the fort. You pair up with Grius, who is a member of the Knights Guard, who disbands from the Knights Guard because he's like, I'm your contact. I'm the guy that you were coming to this fort to meet with in the first place. They sent you to
Yeah.
me, Gallica. Yo, what up? You and Stroll and Grius formulate a plan to assassinate Louis at the king's funeral.
Yeah. And
And this
that
is when
goes
shit
to
breaks bad.
yep. And hits the fan when suddenly like the whole castle like rises out of the sky, and from under the castle is like the big stone representation of the face of the king, right?
Right.
And he's like, so basically I'm gonna, in the event of my death, we're doing democracy now. So you know the most popular person within like 3 months from now is going to become king next. you know um in my right eyeball here, you can see like the faces of the three most popular people right now, and you know and the 10 most popular people are basically immune to assassination attempts or
Right.
whatever. I don't actually know what the number is. They haven't said that yet, but basically
Right.
like the few most popular people who in the running at that moment are basically immune to any death by any human means, or
Right.
not
Because
human
there's
means,
obviously some
person
flexibility
means.
there. There's right, person me.
It's
There's
gonna be so
obviously
hard to
some
talk about this game.
exactly. There's obviously some flexibility there because like what happens is when Grius goes up to try and assassinate Louis, he is literally frozen within midair, like by these orange magical chains, and then Louis just cuts his throat and he
Yeah.
falls to the ground and he's dead.
Yep.
But so there's obviously some flexibility to the rule of, okay, if you're a candidate, you can't get with because I'm a
Yeah.
candidate and people are with me all the time.
Well, so they haven't unraveled the rules of it yet, because one interesting thing is that the king doesn't give you all the terms and conditions of this, and so like everybody, the whole game is trying to like figure out the intricacies
Right.
of how things work, right? Like it's like maybe 10 hours after this, after the king sets this plan into motion, that the church actually like kind of comes together and figures out, okay, so the reason why that dude couldn't kill King Louis is because he was like the second most popular candidate, and there's
Right.
this rule in place that that except by duel, no person can kill can kill a popular candidate, right?
Right.
So assassination is out of the question right now. At least unless they can actually like get Louis to agree to a duel.
Right. And so this puts us in a bad position because our plan is to get close enough to Louis to figure out how to break the curse and
Mhm.
then kill him.
Yeah.
Um if not one, the other, if not both, you know.
Yeah.
So what are we supposed to do now? The guy that really seemed to know what was going on is dead. We have a lot of extra rules and stipulations on top of us that we didn't have before, which is making things a problem.
Mhm.
And Stroll comes up with the idea that, well, if we need to get close to Louis, let's just go get close to Louis. We'll win his
Yeah.
favor. We'll get his eyes on us. And an opportunity presents itself for this when, after having teamed up with Hulkenberg to take out Zorba the Necromancer, who decided he was going to make a play for the King's Royal Scepter, which is an incredibly powerful igniter, which was theorized to be able to, you know, completely disband the whole thing and give whoever was in control of it just authority to do what they wished. But the king had a contingency plan in place for that too. He was like, excuse you, who said you could touch my scepter?
He has some of that Joestar blood in him, I guess, where he's just like, I knew what you were thinking 3 months ago, and I put this plan into place to stop you.
Exactly. So you team up with Hulkenberg, and then the church sets up a tournament. They're like, okay, well, we got to figure out how we're going to figure out who is the most popular, because it's a popularity contest, isn't it? And the church is ostensibly the second most authority in this country. So everybody just kind of rolls with it.
Yeah, it's like a pseudo-medieval thing where, like, the concept of separation of church and state hasn't really happened yet, you know, and, like, they're, like, kind of separate, but also, like, there's some overlap there in terms of just, like, the power, you know.
Right. So the church says we're doing a tournament. I guess we're doing a tournament. What's this tournament? Whoever brings in the best bounty wins. What quantifies the best bounty? I know it when I see it. So what do we do? Yeah. We're not like, I mean, we're super strong and cool, right? Because like we're the protagonists, but like it's the beginning of the game. So like realistically, we're limited on what we can do.
And everybody else is going to go for like big, huge monsters just to get like the biggest head. So where it can be like, okay, well, what's the biggest head figuratively? And of course, it's this elusive bounty,
disfamed captain. He's a disfamed member of an elusive section of the Knights Guard, and he's allegedly been kidnapping children in the desert. His name's Heisme. We're gonna go him up.
Yep, but of course, as you might guess from the fact that I was thirsting over him a minute ago, you know, he's actually not such a bad guy. In fact, he didn't kidnap any children. He was framed for it, you know.
Yeah, so you get out to the desert and you get into this sandworm pit, and
the sandworm sequence is fun.
It is fun, yeah. And then you fight Heisme, and he has all these cool abilities that he can do that he doesn't have when he joins your party 5 minutes later. I'm not mad. But yeah, so it turns out that actually it's some of the local guardsmen that have been responsible for the disappearance of children. They've been going into the lower regions of the castle of the area. So like, what's going on? We need to get to the bottom of this, because we thought that we were on board with the guards, and now we don't know what to think. So Heisme, you're coming with us, and we're going to go figure this out. And what it turns out is Joanna, sorry,
I don't know, I guess kind of like the not the Jarl of the town, but like kind of like the de facto mayor of the town, essentially. Yeah, the Duchess of the town. Sure. You know, who is very integrated into the church, right? You know, it's kind of a town that's run by the church, and you know has like the big Damocles of the church over it. You know.
Right.
But
and so she had a child, and the child passed away, and she was so stricken with grief that through some dark magic or some means is able to turn her child into a human monster. I'm just going to start feeding children of the village to this human, because it's my child now. So we go put a stop to that right quick. You know, we push the platforms up and down, and we go through the waterways, and we do our little sneaking segment so we don't get ate by the baby head.
Yeah.
And then we fight the baby head, and then we kill the baby head. And then there's one of the most heart touching scenes I've seen in a JRPG in like the past 5 years.
Yeah, like where Heismade, who has lost his own child, is, having this heart to heart with her, and is basically like, you could never have your child back, even no matter how much it hurts, but you know, you can't. You have to actually overcome that grief rather than turning to this other stuff to try to like bring your child back. And Heismade kind of went into hiding because he wasn't able to confront his own grief. And he literally still carries the urn with his child's bones in it,
Mhm.
and is like, I'm not going to go bury this like is tradition with my people yet because I haven't let go of this. But now that I see what this grief does to other people, I'm going to do that for my child, and you need to let go as well. And yeah, it's just perfect confluence of like meeting a new side character party member of your party versus the villain of this current mission. Just like bringing all those things together, and it's like,
Right.
yeah,
And then the
and
Phantom Thieves do Joanna's Mind Palace, and
yep. And she's like, well, I'm going to face up for my actions now. I've realized that feeding other people's children to my child is bad now. Um and then I
I've
mean,
learned the errors of my ways.
which fair enough to her. She takes that on the head, literally. Because you bring her into the place where they're judging all the heads and everything, and
Right, like
the
this big wild
yeah,
coliseum they have set up in Bryleport or
yeah.
Brylehaven.
Yep, and then the other members of the church, Forden and Godot, kind of like approach her and are like, "Yeah, did you actually do that?" And she was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Okay, off with your head." And
Right,
that's kind of where we leave off on the plot.
right. We have stepped a little bit beyond that to just a meeting that you have with a couple of Louis' henchmen.
Yeah,
But that there's not much plot development that happens there beyond being told pretty likely
yeah,
where the next plot development is about to happen.
yeah. I've
Um,
gotten slightly further than that, but
oh, I have not.
yeah, I basically know what the next dungeon is, and I've done some side quest stuff up to that, but
Ooh.
I haven't gotten much further in the main plot, and I won't spoil anything for you. But
Gotcha. But
but yeah,
yeah, with that being said, I mean, we've pretty well covered all the direct gameplay and story beats that I wanted to
yeah,
talk about. I think I think it would be a shame for us to not mention at least how incredible the art direction, the UI design,
ooh,
like every single piece
I
of
mean,
visible art in this game, how
yeah,
incredible. The music, incredible. Every single artistic aspect of this game, almost a 10 out of 10. Like I can find basically no complaints.
yeah, like it. So Persona or the Persona games have like a very like pop art aesthetic, right? They're
Right.
the the blacks are pitch black, ink black, and then everything is colored in these very distinct colors, right? They're like
Right.
instead of doing a lot of shading or anything like that, they're doing just like one full color for
Block
somebody's face or
colors.
somebody's hair or somebody, yeah, black colors. But this game takes a way more like painterly approach to it, like where everything looks like it's brushed with oil, and it melds that with the anime aesthetic so well, right?
Right. It's very
And it
watercolory. You can see the
yeah,
pen strokes and textures.
it's gorgeous. Like they really nailed it on the head with something that feels like more like a traditional medieval painting, but still with that signature that similar
The
Soejima
atlas to it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, right. And then the UI, I will say the UI is like at first slightly overwhelming, right? Because it's similar doing the very like maximalist thing, but it doesn't have the kind of like the pop art simplicity of Persona. So,
Sure.
it does get a little bit hazy, but like once you start like actually getting through the menus and stuff and like learning where things are, it's not quite so bad. It and it does look great. Like it
I
does.
think the artistic integrity of it outweighs the mild clunk.
Yeah,
Like I think the menu system is like, I mean, especially if you've played a Persona game before, the menu system is pretty well
yeah,
drilled into my brain enough that, beyond the art direction, I just know where I'm going. But
yeah. And it's helpful that it's
with it, it's pretty clear if you just look for what you're looking for.
yeah, and it's helpful that for a lot of the most important systems, right? Like, every time you're looking for something to do and you're like, okay, let me check on what my followers are up to, or let me auto heal in battle, or any of those like very specific minutia things that you might want to do right away, it has a shortcut for it, right?
Right.
It really like thinks through like, okay, like what are the things you really need and what are the things that are like, okay, you can go through a little bit of clunk just to,
Right. Do I have to be able
use a
to
burn
use an
potion or
XP
whatever.
item? Right. Do I have to be able to use an XP item directly from my inventory at one button press? No.
Yeah, usually no. But yeah, it's just so elegant. And then the music, Jesus Christ, the music.
Jesus Christ,
Bro,
the music. If you do nothing
snub,
else, listen to
snub.
the soundtrack. Second of all, play Metaphor ReFantazio. Like I don't
Yeah,
have I have nothing else to add. There are some characters we haven't talked about
we can
because
definitely
I
talk about some of the
honestly
characters.
I think we hold it for our Patreon episode. I think that at least at the point that we're at, there's enough difference between what you've experienced and what I've experienced in
Fair.
like direct character interactions and the archetype, like the specific archetype lines, that I
Yeah,
would rather cover that in a full discussion of the full game when we finish, like on Patreon, on the main line, whatever
yeah,
makes sense at the time. I'm fine with not having said all I have to say about Katharina right now because
yeah.
realistically, I haven't
Um,
interacted with her enough to have an opinion. I think she's great, but I don't know anything yet. So like I feel like with that we can hold some of those for when we finish.
yeah, that's fair. But goddamn the music. Like it's every single time I feel like a Persona game comes out, like people turn at least one or two of the tracks into a meme, right? What was the one from Persona? Last Surprise. That one's definitely a
Yeah,
meme.
disturbing the peace.
Yeah, but this one, like the what's it called? Warriors in Arms or Warriors in Valor, I think.
Yeah,
Warriors in Valor
battle
is
theme, the main battle
yeah,
theme.
where they have the Buddhist chanting, not rapping, importantly. According to the composer is it's just like it's so good. And then the choral chanting that hits right after he's done is just, oh my god, it's so elegant, it's so good. Like, and it doesn't sound like just another fantasy score most of the time, right?
It is wholly unique. I've never heard
Yeah.
anything like it. Shoji
Yeah, like-
Meguro hits another OST out of the fucking ballpark.
Yeah, like he took a lot of notes from like like hymns and stuff, and then like adds this kind of like Buddhist chanting to it, and then like on top of that, all the lyrics are in Esperanto, which is like a constructed language from like the 1900s. So like it's in a language that isn't familiar to our world, really, right? Like I actually don't know. So like I remember in one of the early cutscenes, there's like a big block of text in a made up language. I don't know if that's Esperanto or not, but that would be a really cool detail if it was. Let me see if I can figure that out. Metaphor. You just fan for a second.
God, I mean, it's like I said, there's so many things that like I want to jump on that I'm holding myself back from because it's like there are things that I want to say about certain characters that I know will change within like the next 5 hours, it there are so many tracks in this game in the OST that are just phenomenal. There are so many that you could just pull as like easy listening for an afternoon or like going absolutely insane. I really don't know where to vamp anymore. I just like I play the game. play
Yeah.
metaphor. If I have not, if
Oh my god.
me being as excited about this as I am has not indicated to you that you should give some amount of time to this, I don't know what I can do. The demo for this is like 5
Yeah.
hours and it's completely free. Go play that. If nothing else,
Uh,
like
did you
please
ever get to the end
play
of the
metaphor.
demo? Did you ever
Yeah,
get to
I
the end
beat
of
the
the
demo
demo?
before the game came out.
Okay, where does that end? I'm curious in the story.
You beat, well, I beat the red dragon and then I got out of that cave and then like it was pretty much the end of that dungeon was the end of the demo.
Okay, interesting. That's honestly not a
So it's
bad
like,
place to put it.
I wouldn't say it's the first major dungeon, but it's like a tutorial dungeon almost,
Huh.
but like the tutorials are very front loaded to it because it's a JRPG and
Yep.
realistically like they don't need to show you that much throughout 5 hours. Like
Hmm.
it's just it's a big chunk of the game that will allow you to get familiar enough with some of the systems to make a determination whether or not you're like, yes, I like this combat. Yes, I like this art style. I can get through this game. Or
Yeah.
no, I won't spend my $70. I might pick it up on sale, you know. But
Honestly,
if nothing else, play that demo.
honestly, if I were them, I would have put the end of the demo at like, at the point where you get the gauntlet runner, basically, right? Because I feel like if you gave them that first full dungeon, then like they could actually get around like the actual scope of the story of the game, right? Because I do think that's
That's a
kind of the hook of it.
lot of game to give away for
I know
free.
I know it is, but also like, you know, if you if you give people that much of the game for free, then it really gives them the incentive to be like, okay, this is like first of all, I know the scope of the game, and also like you've introduced to me like the core conceit of the game, right?
Sure.
As opposed to how it is, where it's like, you get that there's a that you're plotting to take down this guy, but you have no idea about like the actual like the greater political machinations that will become a much bigger part of the game. So I don't know. I just kind of feel like the Gauntlet Runner would be the best place to put it, in my opinion. But
From a
obviously,
story standpoint,
yeah,
I could see the argument for wanting to put the story hook in the demo. However, I think from just a company standpoint and a sheer like gameplay mechanical standpoint, I think that the demo is fairly generous
it is.
as far as gameplay demos go,
Yeah,
especially nowadays. Like used to, you would have like you could download a demo for basically every game on the PSP store. Now go on
mhm.
Steam and try and find which games have demos, and it's like
It's better
you know.
around Next Fest, but like
Mhm.
even on Next Fest, it's like, okay, most games will only give you like 15, 30 minutes, an hour if they're generous, right?
Right. I mean,
It's
like, and
not that
even
much.
think about like the Breath of the Wild demo, right? Like,
Hmm.
they don't have a specific cutoff point for that or anything like explicitly preventing you from doing realistically anything you want to in that game other than a 15-minute timer, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, come on. Like, put some effort into it. Like, give me a vertical slice of one. But and this, I don't want to say it was like, okay, well, they put effort into it because they made the game and then they set a cutoff point for the demo. But
Yeah.
there's a difference in perceived quality of those demos to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say definitely pick up the demo if you're like on the fence about this game, but like if you've ever enjoyed like any turn-based RPG or like a Persona game previously, or even if this game just kind of sounds cool to you, check out the demo. Like it's literally just like 5 hours of the game and you get like a lot of the gist of the gameplay, right? At the
Mm-hmm.
very least. You know, there are a few things we haven't touched on. First of all, just like the fits in this game. Like, you know, oh my god. Will's in particular just like looks ripped straight out of like, the Met Gala, like just like this
the
really nice like, what's it called? Like plaid jacket, and like there's like a little like kind of medieval looking necklace around it, and it's just, oh my god, it's really good. Like you could see any of these designs at like a fashion show or anything, and they would look totally normal. And
Absolutely.
God, God help me if anybody wears these to the Halloween party, because that is. But yeah, like just excellent costume design. We didn't talk about igniters really, which I think is an interesting like kind of lore element of the game. Like
Right.
so, on top of the inheritance thing where like they where you can like take skills from other classes you've already been studying, you can also buy these things called igniters, which in the
Mhm.
world are basically just like the way normal people who don't have archetypes use magic, right? And
Right.
it's kind of it's basically like this world's version of a gun, right?
Right.
It's a thing that you buy that is like better than a sword at things, but also like it expends a lot of more energy to do, you know.
Sure.
And in this game, like I believe, it gives you an extra skill in combat, but
Mm.
also like it's twice the MP to use.
Right.
So like it's helpful in a clutch situation where like you need a specific skill that doesn't come with any of your archetypes, but at the same time, like you know you don't want to use too much of it because you can really use up your MP pretty quickly if you rely on them. you
Right.
know it's kind of an interesting piece of lore. And then obviously you befriend basically the guns, and
Right.
have like a whole side quest with her. And it is funny that for a game that is like in some ways pretty like woke by Western standards, it's got a lot of like class equality and stuff like that going on. It is funny that you befriend a gun owner or a gun shop owner. It is pretty funny.
Well,
They're not.
there is the entire other side to the coin, though, there with Moore and archetypes,
Yeah,
which we didn't really touch on. And I think Moore is definitely going to be one of those characters that we talk about more in the follow up episode.
we're gonna be talking
Um,
about more and more. Wow.
yeah, we're going to be talking about more, but he's basically the Igor of this game. But
Yeah.
he is a man trapped outside of time. He has been placed in library prison by the king. He doesn't
So,
specify which king. He just says the king.
yeah.
Um, and he is the guy that is writing the book that Will is reading. And through this connection of this book, Will is able to interact with Moore and therefore, not only access but enhance the abilities of archetypes. Um,
Yeah.
and it's like we haven't gotten far enough into the game where Moore has been willing to let me ask him the questions I want to ask him, because what do you mean you're the guy that, huh?
Yeah.
But again, just like things are so blunt, but also there are so many interesting strings and interesting draws at all times. And
Yeah.
even beyond the story, there are so many mechanical tangents that you can go on that all work together to make this thing cohesive. It is insane how
Yeah.
many systems are constantly interlocking.
Yeah. Like we'll definitely get into more later as we learn more about him. I will say, I like his cat. I like that he has a cat and you can just pet him whenever you want.
Dope
And
cat.
yeah, good cat. We like a cat guy. But yeah, I mean, I do. I'm not really sure what else to talk about. Right? Like, there's not a lot. It's just kind of it's a game where you do magic democracy. And oh, one thing I will say that's kind of thematic is that like right now it's kind of like it's playing with this idea of like so you don't want to become king, right? And but you're
No,
kind of
the
like,
entire reason we're doing this is so that the prince can become king.
yeah, exactly. We're trying to basically like take out his political opponents so that the hex will go away and the prince can kind of get back up and be like, okay, now I'm the rightful king, right? Basically that sort of
Hmm.
thing. But they're also playing with
Presumably Hyphlodius the Sixth.
yeah, but they're also playing with this idea that like maybe you want to become king. There's a dialogue option right before Joanna gets beheaded where she's like, basically she basically asks you like, something about whether or not you want to become king, or like when you become king, do X, Y,
Yeah,
Z.
it's like
And
when you
you know,
become king, what do you want to do? And it was like
yeah,
I think I said something to the effect of like, I just want to help everybody.
yeah. I think I said I don't want to become king, you know, but like it's putting those little seeds in there of like, you know, what's actually going to become your end goal in the game, right?
Mm,
You know, and like I don't want to like speculate too much, but like I do see like, you know, a definite road this of that being just like, you know, something happens to the prince and he's out of the picture, and now you actually have to become a real political candidate, right?
right.
You know, or you know, at some point he's like, well, you know, actually you should become the king because you're way better at this than I am. You know,
Right.
I've just been in dreamland for like 5 years, you know.
Right. I've been
I don't
hanging
know
out
what
with
I'm
Kirby.
doing. Yeah. Yeah, and then also like on that note, there's another interesting thing where like you're not the only kind of like puppet in the race, right? Like Luis isn't actually like doing anything on his own to you know, to be a candidate, right? He's having people fight in his stead essentially,
Right.
right? Like and the same thing with the church, where like Forden is twofold to take on a bounty, but he has a lackey who will do it, you know. Oh, in
Right.
the church, we didn't even talk about the church. Again, it's just one of those things where it's like, I don't know what else to say. Oh yeah, there's this one thing we're talking about. Oh yeah, that and that and that. But yeah, but like,
But the church has been so far posed as just like this very ominous, mysterious like organization.
yeah,
We've been shown a couple of like sketchy backroom meeting type dealings,
yeah,
um, but we have not been allowed full information on like, you know, what does Forden want to be king for? Like, what would the
yeah,
church do if they had actual complete power? We don't have the answers to any of those questions, which are like, as far as I can tell, so far the only ones that I can pose.
yeah. And like one interesting thing, or the interesting thing about the church to me right now is like, so early on in the game, like there's some kind of quest you need to complete for one of those for some guy who's like dying on the street, who's like, I need this specific medicine that's only at the
Right,
church, right? So you go to the church to pick up the medicine, and then they're like, well, you're an Elda, you know, you're one of the lower class or one of the lower tribes, you know. I'm not gonna get you anything unless you do this and this and this for me, you know.
right.
And like it you know, it's just one of those things where like you see the institutionalization of the caste system in these different aspects of the culture, right? You know, and like the church is just kind of like this pillar of the corruption in the society, right?
Can I just take 1 second and say, what a stupid little guy? I love him so much.
Who?
The dumb little dude sitting on your desk right now.
Oh, Finney? Yeah, he's a goob. Yeah,
He's
look at
sitting
this
there with his
guy.
eyes closed, like, oh, taking a nap, standing up.
Yeah, he's a silly little goob. Sorry to all the audio listeners, you don't really get to experience the cat. You know, that's why you
Yeah.
check us out on YouTube. You
You
know,
either turn your phone on while you're listening on Spotify and look at the cat, or you go over to the
yeah,
YouTube video and give us another
yeah.
viewer retention metric.
I'm gonna scare him away. But yeah, this is the second best cat content you can get related to Metaphor ReFantazio. The first is actually buying the goddamn game, which apparently this game's been selling very well.
Good. I
Like
good.
I actually think that you know, with the success of Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal, and then on top of that, them porting those three games to basically every platform last year, and then Persona 3 Reload on top of that, it's really just
Right.
kind of like built this like insular hive of people who are like, you know, really into this, you know, and
Well,
like
then,
has
and then also within the past, what, 2 3 years, the most we got another mainline SMT game. Like,
yeah. Like, let me see if there's any. Metaphor ReFantazio sold 1 million copies on release day across all
on
platforms.
release day, a
Yeah,
million copies in a day.
that's insane for an
That's
80-hour JRPG. That
that's
is
pretty
not it.
awesome.
That isn't a new IP, right? And also, like, quite frankly, has a very intimidating title.
Right.
Like, Metaphor ReFantazio? What does that mean? I still
Right.
don't
I
know what
can't.
the ReFantazio is.
I could theoretically accidentally look up Final Fantasy, right?
But they're just making up their own words here. Like, you want to use Fantasio? Fine. But ReFantazio? What are we redoing here?
Right. When was the first time? Did I miss
Yeah,
one?
what was the first Fantasio? That's the real question.
That's the real question. What was the first
You know what?
Fantasio?
You know what? What if we get a prequel game about King Hythlodaeus the Fifth, and that's called
Metaphor
Metaphor
the
Fantasio?
Fantasio?
Yeah, Fantasio. Fantasio Metaphor Origins. There we
Well,
go. That's
Josh,
the title.
speaking of our metaphor refantasio and by proxy our current standing in the popularity rankings of the race to become king of podcasts, we have to do something to amend your recent flub on the Gauntlet Rudder podcast. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty rough, but we've got a thing here. Last time we recorded this episode or attempted to record it, we talked a bit about the Game Awards. To be honest, the Game Awards were pretty mid and they don't matter, so we're not going to do that. And this time, we're actually going to do our own awards. This is the How-to Otaku Awards.
First annual.
First annual. Definitely didn't come up with it like 3 hours ago, but
Definitely didn't incept this idea 10 minutes before recording.
yeah, but I'm happy that we're doing this, and maybe we'll make this its own thing once we like reach a more consistent level of like doing things. But like, I think that just as like a way to tie the year together and to just talk about the stuff we've liked, that we've covered over the show and just like the year in general, like I think it's a good way to just kind of tie up the last episode of the show for 2024,
Absolutely.
which has been a year.
So
Period.
we have four categories, and these are all, well, these are mostly based off of just the shows and movies that we've covered this year.
Mhm.
So the four categories are best series, best film, dark horse, which we are taking to mean the thing that we watched that we either weren't expecting much from but were impressed with anyways, or something that we thought we were going to dislike and ended up enjoying regardless.
Yeah.
And then we also have our little fun category, best non-anime thing. So this is just best thing. This
Yeah.
is just our like special shout out where we get to talk about a thing that we want to talk about for a minute. So,
Yeah.
Josh, for best series, what's your
Yeah. For
pick?
best series, I'm going with Delicious in Dungeon, which is, I think, probably the best beginner anime there is right now. Like, if we're just talking about like, you know, the accessibility culturally speaking of where the culture is right now, and on top of being like on one of the biggest streaming platforms right now, I don't know if you can do any better than this, right? Like there are always arguments what's the best one, and I would say like, definitely in the running for that is stuff like, Cowboy Bebop or anything Ghibli makes and stuff like that. But if we're talking about
Right.
like, current contemporary series that, are making a big cultural splash, but are also just like, very accessible to just about anybody who is like familiar with fantasy or, interested in like, fun high concept comedy, right? Like this is about as good as you get, right? There's no bad episode of this show, I don't think. All the characters are extremely well written and compelling. It has a real keen eye for ecology and food culture that just like pushes it above a lot of other world building in this genre. Like there's nothing to dislike about this show in my opinion, right? There's nothing that you can really bounce off of and say, "No, I don't like that," unless you just like don't like to have to feel joy, I guess. Like I really don't know. Like it's fantastic. By the time this episode comes out, it will have already happened. So like my brother who has been listening to the show but does not watch anime at all, I literally bought him the first volume of Delicious in Dungeon. That is how like recommendable this series is. That like I know that he will like it if I just get him to read this first volume, right? So
That's dope.
what else can I give it to? You know?
Well, so here's the answer for what else you could give it to.
Yeah.
If I'm not picking Delicious in Dungeon, which I'm doing this partially to be a contrarian and partially because I really do think it's the best series we covered this year, Serial Experiments Lane.
Fantastic show.
One of the best mind I've seen in years. I know it's an older show, so it's not really contemporary. It's not something that I can say, wow, but it did get a bit of resurgence in popularity this year, and I think for very good reason.
To the point that Boa reunited in 2024
and
released a whole ass album.
Oh yeah. It is absurd to me how well this show still holds up so many years later. It's insane to me how prescient the themes that it tackles and the topics that it covers still are to people and their day-to-day lives and how they interact with the internet and how they interact with other people. I mean, we did, obviously, I know this is my time to gush about it, but like I can't think of anything new to say about it right this second. It's just like I have to watch it again. It's calling. It's the back of my brain is itching, and I feel like I need to revisit Lane already. This is the first time I've seen this show when we sat down to watch it this year, and it's going on rotation. I'm going to watch this, maybe not, on a yearly basis, but this show will be back again. I will be watching this show again. And there are only like a handful of shows that I can say like, yes, I will sit down and I will watch that whole show again. And this is one of them. So Serial Experiments Lane is my best series of the year.
Yeah, I really can't argue with that. Like to me, it is one of those things where it's like, maybe in a year or two when I've revisited it, and and I can make more of the connections that the show is making because I know where it's going later on, then maybe then it will grow greater in my estimation, right? But in the moment it was just a bit more of a mind, right? Like you said.
Right.
But I do like that we have like two diametrically opposed things, and like there's space for both of those things, right?
Well, yeah, and I think Delicious in Dungeon is great. If I was going to pick a series that came out this year, it would be either Delicious in Dungeon or Dawn to Dawn. Dawn to Dawn's not in the running because we haven't covered it yet on the show. So, like Delicious in Dungeon, I'm glad that we have the opportunity, and I hope that we continue this in the future, but to have the opportunity to have two actual serious answers for best series and be able to like fully argue it and nobody's mad that anybody picked one or the other.
Yeah, like Lane will stick with you, but Delicious in Dungeon, you could really just cozy up with at any point,
Absolutely.
You just need both of those things, and I think I think it's great that we chose two different things. Absolutely. On the flip side of that, I also like it when we agree on stuff and we could just both gush about a thing.
Look back and I'm going to spoil it a little bit because I don't want to steal the audio space for too long talking about one thing. But Look Back was also my dark horse because I'm a passive fan of Chainsaw Man. I think the anime is really well done so far from what I can tell. I haven't kept up with it too much, and I've only read so far into the manga. But this film, when I hear Hashino is making a new film, and I go in with pretty much no context other than watch it, it's on Amazon, this is not what I was expecting. It is such, in two minds, it is such a kick in the stomach and a breath of fresh air. It's so hard to hold in my head because there are parts of it that are like so out there that I appreciate because they are so out there. But then there are other parts of it that are just so grounded. And I would love to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, like so I had been hearing about this movie coming out of Annecy, the film festival that happens
Mm,
every year for animation and stuff. So it was kind of my suggestion, and usually Brogan handles the more of the like, here's what we're doing, trying to curate this experience for me. But, Look Back was kind of one of my contributions, and I I do really enjoy or do really like the fact that I saw this on the horizon, and that in a way, things just kind of shook up in such a way that we needed something really short and easy to talk about, in a slot. Because man, oh man, this movie is just such an interesting piece of art, right?
oh yeah.
It's
And absolutely
simultaneously,
not to snub War of the Rohirrim or Summer Wars, both excellent movies, but
yeah,
this is a film.
yeah, it has such a like because of its short runtime, it is so laser focused on this specific relationship between these two specific people, and
Right.
their relationship through the art that they make. But at the same time, it always feels so intimately considered, and and just they thought about every single little facet of the relationship and how it would actually operate. And it's just those first 30, 40 minutes where it's, you're seeing their relationship evolve over time, and them, growing and changing as artists, is just some of the most beautiful filmmaking I've seen in a long time. And
Right.
I think we were both, by the end a little bit dicey on the kind of plot twist that happens towards the middle, and
Sure.
some of the thematic implications of it. But
And I have definitely mellowed on that. I remember kind of tweaking and being like just paying way too much focus to something that really I didn't need to. And I've definitely mellowed on that a lot. I
yeah,
really do appreciate what it is going for and what it is trying. And I don't know. I appreciate it when a mangaka steps away from the thing that people kind of expect of them more than anything.
yeah,
um and to see something so different um from the Chainsaw Man guy, which even then it's Chainsaw Man does have a lot about human connection and personal relationships, but to see something so laser focused like this is it's refreshing.
yeah. And I don't think there is a single moment of this movie that will not stick in my brain, right? Specifically, there is the sequence where Fujino has finally made a friend, and she is
Mhm.
skipping in the rain, and you know runs past the camera with this crazy fisheye lens, and
Right.
it's just oh my god, this is cinema. I wish I could have seen this in a movie theater.
No,
It's so
seriously.
unfortunate. It's so unfortunate that 58-minute movies don't get theatrical releases, I guess. But but
Build your
yeah,
own theater, just get a projector and a
I would love that. I would love that. But yeah, look back, best film we saw this year, right? Just inarguably, and just a,
like I
a
said,
technical achievement.
incredible looking film.
Yeah,
Um, I kind of already mentioned this was also my dark horse. Again, it's just so mind blowing to me that this is the Chainsaw Man guy, and that I had no idea that this movie was coming out.
mhm.
Um, and for those reasons alone, it is my dark horse. But Josh, I know the whole kind of thesis of this show is founded upon Josh hasn't seen much anime,
Yeah,
but Devilman Crybaby. First of all, I wasn't expecting it to strike as kind of as an
yeah,
underground pick, but I guess it's not as super widely discussed or well known as I kind of expected it to be for one. So
yeah.
let's hear it.
Yeah, so this is my dark horse pick, Devilman Crybaby. I I knew that this show existed because it was kind of at the very front end of Netflix, the Netflix releasing anime
Right.
project, right?
Mhm.
It was I think it was not only one of the first things that they like put on their service in this medium, but also like one of the first things they actually like co-produced and
Right. They had a
distributed
hand in
in America.
producing this. Yeah.
Yeah, and like, and also I was familiar with Science Saru's work, and gosh, let me just remind myself of his name. So I don't get it wrong. It is Masaki Yuasa. Yes.
Mm.
I had seen a couple of his films up to that point. I saw Night is Short Walk on Girl, which I think is really
Yep.
good, and we might talk about someday.
Hopefully.
And Inuo, which is a very different movie, and
Mhm.
I don't like all of it, but the stuff that I do like is really cool. Um,
Mhm.
but I wasn't familiar. I wasn't really familiar with what this story was. I wasn't familiar with the original manga that it was based on. Like, I wasn't familiar with any of it, and it was just like a real like blind spot. Like, what am I going to? What do I expect from this? And I was not expecting for it. I mean, let me say this: when I was going into it, I was expecting something more in line with Berserk, right? Just kind
Sure.
of like a fantasy thing with a very dark edge to it, right? Because that's kind of
Sure.
the visual that it gives off, right? Maybe with a little bit more style and flair, just because of Science Saru's like, you know, incredible craft, right? But
Right.
I was expecting that, and then in the first couple of episodes, it was like, okay, setting up a little bit more of like okay, this is like a monster kind of thing where it's like, oh, the monsterness is a metaphor for like his puberty and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, that's cool. If that's what the show is, I can probably get down with that, right? I did not expect for it to then swing back into the Berserk stuff and be like, okay, here is now literally like, you know, Jesus Christ apocalypse, right? And not only to do that, but then to balance it out so well with the kind of like coming of age ennui, right? All
Right.
of that stuff kind of collided together in what I would say is probably like my second or third place pick for any show this year, right? And that is behind Delicious in Dungeon, and that is like alongside Delicious in Dungeon,
Right.
and alongside
That's on a podium
you
with
know
Delicious in Dungeon and the Serial Experiments
JoJo's and
Lane
Serial
and JoJo's
Experiments
Bizarre
Lane.
Adventure, which
Like,
I did not pick JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for my series of the year because for me, I felt that was a foregone conclusion. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the entire reason we're doing it as a series run is because hello, right here, I insisted. So I felt it was a foregone conclusion and I wanted to pick something more interesting than that. But yeah, in a
yeah,
year where we've covered JoJo's Part 4,
yeah,
Delicious in Dungeon, Serial Experiments Lane, to be in the top 3 on that podium
it's a
we've
real
covered a lot of
accomplishment.
hitters.
Yeah, like it's such a beautiful thing, and like Netflix, if you're listening and you want to put out like a really nice Blu-ray that has all the episodes in nice 1080p condition and some special bonus features or whatever, I will give you a week's paycheck for that, please. Just just put it in my hands right now, please. Ted Sarandos, give it to me. All right.
And
Devilman
this brings us
Crybaby.
to
I'm
our
talking
final category.
Yeah. Yep, that brings us to our final category, which is best non-anime thing. This is just anything that came out this year or that we experienced this year that we want to talk about. You know, I'll let you go first because I just talked about Devilman Crybaby a bunch, but have at it.
So I will give you the segue, but um for me, my best non-anime thing, I kind of hemmed and hawed about this for a while because I wasn't really sure. And then I kind of just realized like, oh, it's my show. I can put whatever I want to. Bloodborne on PC, baby. Bloodborne on PC. The fans did what Sony could never. Thank you. That's really all I have to say about it. I mean, Bloodborne is just like the Souls franchise in general are some of the hardest hitting games that I've played. Demon Souls, Dark Souls 3. Notice I skipped one. Bloodborne, Sekiro, Elden Ring. Like 6 of the greatest 100 games, like
Harris
no
Bomber guy would be so
misses.
disappointed in you.
Harris Bomber Guy can.
Come on the show.
I would love to have Harris Bomber Guy on this show. That would be great. I can set up a floral printed wall behind me and he can break through it. It'd be great.
Yeah.
The Souls games have always had a special place to me, and for many reasons, I have never been able to play Bloodborne. I never had a PlayStation 3. I never had a PlayStation 4. I had a PS2, and then I had a
It's
PC.
not on PS3.
PC. It was not on PS3. I misspoke.
Yeah.
But Demon Souls is one of those that was on PS3 and was easier for me to like access. Like my friends had PS. Like by the time I was wanting to play Demon Souls, my friends all had like PS4s and shit. So like my buddy Kian had a PS3 that I could borrow to play Demon Souls. But it was his PS4 was like the thing that he played on at the time. So like until now, Bloodborne has always been like just barely out of reach because I don't have a ton of disposable income. I can't just buy a PlayStation 4 at this point for Bloodborne and Bloodborne only, you know. I could have spent $60 on it on Steam if Sony wanted to let me do that, but they didn't. So due to the hard work and dedication of some very talented fans, who I will not be naming, because if you want to find it, you can find it. It's very easy to, but I will not be using my platform to point a spotlight on somebody that might get in trouble for doing what they've done. So Bloodborne on PC. It's dope. I'm yo ho, you know, I like it is a culmination of several things that I am deeply passionate about: games preservation, Souls games, the ability to do weird on hardware that you weren't necessarily intended to do. I like all these things. They're fun to me. And now I have Bloodborne on PC because of a combination of the three. So thank you.
That's beautiful.
Now, Josh.
Yeah.
What the is Hundreds of Beavers?
So my non-anime thing of the year is the micro-budget, independently produced slapstick silent comedy Hundreds of Beavers. This is a movie that was produced on a shoestring budget of probably like a few dozen thousands of dollars. So like not much by a movie's budget standard. By like a dozen people who in the Midwest who are just like went out into the woods in the winter with a bunch of mascot costumes and made what is one of the funniest movies I have ever seen in my entire damn life. It is Looney Tunes, it is Buster Keaton, it is like Harold Lloyd, it is all of these different like genre mashups, but like just absolutely executed to a T, right? It is so to give you basically just like the plot synopsis. So it's about this guy who sets out to get revenge on these anthropomorphic animals who have destroyed his favorite cider distillery.
I don't think you need to tell me anymore. I think I'm down. I think I'm going to watch this movie.
Yeah, and it's very easy to get a hold of because it is literally on just about any free streaming service there is. It's on Freevee, it's on Tubi, it's on the Roku channel, it's on Netflix, or it's on YouTube with ads. It's on all of it. Anything where you could watch a movie for free with ads, it's there, I think.
So I can go to YouTube right now and type in Hundreds of Beavers and just watch this at my leisure.
And just watch it at your leisure. And
there it is. It's right there. He's so correct. It's an hour and 48 minutes long. It's free. It's on YouTube Movies and TV.
Yeah, it's a real reminder of the fact that like you really don't need a lot to make an excellent movie, right? You just need a fun idea, some friends, maybe some props and a green screen and some real ingenuity, and you can make something that is delightful from start to finish. It is you can't spoil the movie because so much of the movie is just like sight gags, right? Like, you know, I can't describe to you how funny it is when I can describe to you how funny it is when somebody like sets up like a trap for one of the beavers, and like it goes unnaturally awry, but in a way that still kills the beaver at the end, right? I can describe that sort of thing to you, but it's not as funny as seeing it and like having this like honestly like A tier Oscar worthy sound design, in my opinion. Just like,
Oh.
everything is accentuated to a T, right? And it communicates a story so clearly through visuals alone and through like specific sound design choices because again, silent movie, no dialogue whatsoever. You
Right.
know, like it's just great. It's wonderful. It's those classic silent comedies and cartoons mixed with like a more internet sensibility in a way that is just absolutely delightful. I can't recommend it enough. Again, like Delicious in Dungeon, if you like joy, if you like comedy, just watch this, And again, it's free on
Yeah,
any.
that's what I'm learning from our best non-anime things awards is that really the best things in life are free.
Yeah, the best things in life are free. It's a great time to be a person on the internet with a little bit of know-how.
So, ladies
Now,
and gentlemen, that has been our How to Otaku Awards.
yeah, just a nice little way to wrap up 2024, I think, And just to get a little bit into what we're doing in 2025, I'm gonna see if I can set up a Patreon. There might be some tiers in there. We'll go over that if we decide to drop it sometime in January. But yeah, it'd be a fun goal to just have just a little few things here and there for people who want to
Real.
support us. And then for our schedule, we're doing January 6th. We're getting back into JoJo's for Diamond is Unbreakable, not Diamond is Unbreakable. Sorry, Golden
Nope.
Wind Part
Golden
1.
Wind, Vento Arreo.
Oh yeah.
So that is going to be that's going to be episodes 1 through I believe 21. Is that what we
21.
discussed?
Yes, that's
So
correct.
honest to God, even not watching the show, like with no context at all, if you sat down to watch what you assume to be an approximate first half of the show, you would be able to tell what happened when I would like, I'm not going to say anything, but you will know when you see it, like, oh, this is the thing that's the cutoff point.
Yeah.
But yeah, episode 21. Yeah, we're starting the new year off right with some JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. In fact, we've
Yep.
got some very awesome JoJo's news I'm ready to share at the beginning of
Go
the
right
next
ahead.
episode because at the beginning of the JoJo's episode because I'm hoping
okay.
it develops a little bit more.
Yeah, and then after that that'll be happening on January 6th. And then on January 20th, we will be doing Don.
Wow, what a cursed date schedule for the month of January. Holy shit.
Yeah, just don't say it, don't think it, don't say it, don't think it. Get out of my head.
Hopefully the best thing that's ever happened on either of those 2 days.
Yeah.
Is our How to Otaku episodes.
If you need to just take a break from the real world for various non-political reasons, because we're a non-political podcast, yeah, just tune in for Don, which is, as far as I can tell, not political.
Decidedly not.
Decidedly not. What a weird, strange show that is ending very soon, I think, and I haven't seen more than a few episodes of it. And
the season has already wrapped.
Okay. But there will be a lot to discuss in that episode, I think.
Oh yeah.
Most of it good, at least. But and then I think the only other thing we have scheduled after that, apart from JoJo's the next episode after that, is we're doing the Mappa version of Ranma 1/2 in February, right? So that's on the horizon as well. And then we have a semblance of an idea of what we're doing when JoJo is over, but we're not going to share that right now. But yeah, just get excited because it's gonna be another totemic work in
something
anime.
So incredibly strong. One of the strongest, you might say. One of the universe's strongest warriors.
Don't lay it on too thick. Okay.
I think I can leave it there, and the people who know will know, and the people who don't will be mad at themselves when they find out and realize they knew all along.
Yeah. And yeah, if you want to know all the things that we know and are thinking about during the week, you can check us out on social media. You can check out our Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at How-to Otaku Pod. You can check out our Blue Sky at howtootaku.com. You can also check out our website at howtootaku.com, where I'll always be updating the schedule. If we start making enough money through Patreon, I might actually start paying for Wix and like re-update the website to something really cool. We'll see about that. Please support the show, please.
Hey, if it becomes financially viable, we can substantially increase the production value of this show.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. If it becomes financially viable, we could substantially increase the production value of this show.
Yeah, I won't have to record this in front of this dilapidated-looking bedroom.
There won't be any Whataburger bags on the ground, or
no, there'll still be Whataburger bags on the ground.
You just won't be able to see them. Yeah,
exactly.
We'll be able to hire an editor who knows what they're doing and can bring our bits to if you give us money for the show will get better. Point blank.
Exactly.
Story.
Exactly. But if you can't give your money through Patreon, you can of course support us in other ways. You can like and follow us wherever you're listening. You can leave a comment. You can share us on social medias.
Tell your friends about us. If you've got a friend who you're like, this guy needs to watch Delicious in Dungeon. This guy needs to watch Sword Art Online, the Aincrad arc. Or, if there's anybody you want to like set on a program for like, okay, this is your book club itinerary for what anime to watch, we're here for that. If you just want to hear our opinions on the eclectic assortment of shows that I, in a fever dream, decide to pitch to Josh, we're here for that as well.
This friend of mine needs to come out of the closet. He needs to watch Serial Experiments Lane. That's yeah, just share us around,
Absolutely.
But yeah, thanks for listening to us through 2024, and we'll see you guys in the new year. Until then,
see you, Space Cowboy.